All right, we're gonna go through this trim here on the front right. And this guy's draft cross, he's at about 5 weeks. What I kind of wanted to talk about the most with this foot is actually that I think a lot of people would look at this foot and think it doesn't need to be trimmed, or at least that there's not a lot of length or peripheral growth around the outside, meaning that the hoof wall is not sticking up above the sole. But when I look at this hoof, I see a whole lot of excess bar growing down along the collateral grooves. It's starting to fold over the sole. He's got some retained sole or bar, whatever it is, I'm not really sure, around the apex of the frog. And the concavity of this foot is somewhat diminished compared to what I think it should be if we were able to trim all of that out. And so I'm not a huge proponent of taking the knife and carving in concavity, so to speak. But what I do want to do is free up the natural concavity that's there that might just be filled in with bar and excess sole, which in my head is totally different than carving out concavity into the sole that is maybe steeper or more concave than it naturally would be, and would eventually over time thin the sole if we kept doing that. Here, big guy. All right, so I'm gonna start this trim. Hang on, I'll just reposition us here. I'm gonna start my trim just by kind of looking at his frog. It's starting to fold over the collateral grooves, so I'm gonna wanna clean that up. It's lifting at the apex, I'm gonna address that as well. I'm gonna clean off this bar and just make sure that this sole is nice and concave. Looking at his heel, his medial heel is a tiny bit high. Well, it's pretty darn close actually. And really it's sitting almost where I'd like it. I think I can take about 1/8 of an inch off of either side. His quarters are almost perfect. The most that I need to take off is at this toe here. I wanna make sure that I bring my bevel back to the edge of solar concavity. And that's usually just inside, like at the inside edge of the golden line. Not always, but on him, it's probably gonna fall right about there. And what I mean by the edge of solar concavity is where the sole comes out and comes up and then just starts to flatten out and go forward. And usually it's around the white line area. Hey, sir. Hey, be good. Okay, so I'm gonna come in with my rasp and just kind of clean up that bevel while I'm here. Doing that. Okay, enough. If you're gonna be rude, you're not gonna get to eat. So this is the downside with feeding them while you trim, is they're distracted and not paying attention, which I definitely don't like. But it's a bit of a trade-off. I need them to be patient, especially while I'm filming or taking photos or documenting things. It's a little longer than like a real world 20-minute trim. Okay, so I'm coming in and beveling my toe at about 45 back to the edge of solar concavity. I'm gonna just kind of level out my heels and quarters. There's really not a whole lot to do on them. And I'm always thinking when I'm coming into my heel that I'm trying to mirror the bottom of that collateral groove angle with the angle of my rasp. And it's hard on him because there's so very little to do. A horse that actually has a lot to take off, it's a lot easier to position things because you have more space to work. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that hoof wall. I want to come in now and clean up this bar. And I'm not going to get real specific, whether it's bar or sole or whatever I'm trimming. But what I'm aiming to do, thanks, dude. But what I'm aiming to do is just bring this bar down level with the sole. Hang on, I gotta reposition him. Okay, dude. Move over and behave. Please, sir. It's time to stay back up so life is a little bit easier for you. All right, let's see where we're at now here. Bring you back over here. All right, so I'm just coming through this bar and I'm using the curve of my curved blade knife to mirror the natural concavity and to find any little bumps or ridges that are sticking up. And I really rely on the curved blade for this. It's kind of why it's my favorite. I'm not a big fan of a loop because I find the curve in the loop is too steep, and the flat blade knives, I just have a hard time finding concavity with those. And so I'm just coming around, creating smoothness and evenness in that concavity. I don't really aim to touch everywhere. That's not my intended goal, but anywhere there's a lump or a bump, I want to smooth out. So on this particular hoof, it looks like quite a lot. I'm going to clean this frog up where it's folding into the collateral grooves so that I can make sure it's easy for me to keep it clean. And I'm also just going to taper down the apex where it's lifting anyway. Easy, big guy. So we'll come up this medial side and just open up that collateral groove. His central sulcus actually doesn't look too bad, but the overall height of his frog, it's sticking up higher than his heel. And so I just kind of want to sliver a little bit off to make it even. Hey, easy. And I just want to look in the center sulcus and make sure there's no rot and nothing hiding any deeper than what I can see. And that looks pretty good. The apex of this frog is lifting, and so I'm just going to cut it off, but I'm going to be tapering up out of the frog as I do so. Anything lifted or detached will not reattach, and so for me, I want to remove it. I want to make sure, I want to make sure that I don't leave that liability to trap dirt and debris in that foot. Now I'm going to bring him forward and rasp the flare. I know rasping from the top and rasping to thin that hoof wall is super controversial. I don't really see it that way. I know some people are all up in arms about it. I think there's a time and a place. And with this horse, he has a little bit of flare in the bottom third of his hoof capsule. You can see it just below that ridge. I don't mind thinning the hoof wall in an effort to reduce flare and remove leverage so that that upper 2/3 can continue growing in well connected. I see that as a valuable trade-off, but it would be totally different over thinning the hoof wall in the wrong direction, the wrong angle, or going too far. I mean, we can over thin the hoof wall to the point we destabilize the capsule, and obviously we don't want to be doing that. Hey, you're very rude like that. Easy, big sir. Fix your feet. All right. The fact that he pulls the foot away is not an issue to me. I mean, a horse is going to pull their foot away, but when he does it, he's very abrupt and aggressive with it. It's not an I'm scared pulling my foot away. It's a I don't want to do this, and I'm going to take my foot away whether your knee is behind it or not. And I find those horses a little more challenging than the ones who do it when they're scared, because they're a little bit heavier and more demanding in how they do it. Anyways, I'm focusing my rasping on this bottom third below that ridge, and I'm just trying to hold the rasp at the same angle as the upper growth and come in and remove the leverage. I'm not trying to dub the toe, so to speak, and I'm not trying to make it pretty. What I'm aiming for is smoothness with no leverage. And we're just about done. We'll bring this over here and get this lateral flare. There's actually not very much. So something like that. And then the last thing I'm going to do before I put this foot down is just take, whoops, sorry about that. The last thing I'm going to do is just take the fine side of my rasp and come around and remove that hard edge that got put there between my bevel and rasping the flare from the top. And that will effectively turn that bevel into the roll, or the Mustang roll, whatever you want to call it. Just like that.